Hi, I'm Mark Graban. It was a real treat to be on the podcast with Kim. I am an author, speaker, consultant, entrepreneur. I host podcasts, including My Favorite Mistake, and Kim shared her story with me on that show. I've written books, including The Mistakes That Make Us, is my most recent. So it was great to have the tables turned and have Kim be the host, and I really enjoyed the conversation with her. So I hope you will tune in and watch or listen in.
Welcome to the show. I'm so glad you're here. You're going to be so glad you're here. I'm Kim Sorrelle. I'm an author, a speaker. I do a lot of things in life, but my favorite thing to do is meet people. And I get to meet some extraordinary people. And one of those extraordinary people is here with me today. I got to be on his podcast a while ago, one of his many podcasts. He's been podcasting for 18 years. So he is like the king of all podcasters. I think there should be a trophy, some award, something. He's beat the odds, 18 years of podcasting. One of his podcasts actually is called Lean Whiskey, I think. So that's kind of cool. We'll talk about some stuff. So I want to tell you that Mark is an author, a speaker. He does so much. If I went into his bio, it would take the entire time. So I'm just going to welcome him to the show. Mark Graban, welcome to the show.
Hi, Kim. Thank you. It's great to see you again. Thank you again for coming and sharing your favorite mistake with me on that show. My favorite.
Yeah.
It's good to
Well,
see you.
I had a great time, and it's hard to pick a favorite mistake when you make so many. But somehow I did. And anyway, yes, which is a great show. I love that show because when people can just be authentic and go, hey, you know what? I've made mistakes too. It's kind of encouraging for the rest of us that it's okay. You make mistakes, but you move on and whatever. Anyway, your book is great. Your other books are great. Everything you do, Mark, I just appreciate and admire. And so I want people to really get to know you. And so I want to start with 8-year-old Mark. What was 8-year-old Mark like?
Oh, all right. 8-year-old me was really into baseball, playing baseball, watching baseball. So that was probably one defining trait, I guess. I I wanted to pursue, I think maybe as a third grader, everyone still dreams of being a baseball player. I had a friend of mine in elementary school whose dad was a baseball journalist, and maybe third grade me thought that that was more likely, more possible that I could write about baseball if I couldn't play it at that sort of level. That's a little bit about, a little bit about me. I love video games. I mean, 8-year-old me, this was 1981. So these were very early rudimentary video games, and then eventually home computers. Those were, a couple of my, I guess, key interests as a kid. I read a lot, reading about sports, reading about just anything I could get my hands on. Of course, paper books. 8-year-old me didn't even imagine the internet.
Right. I know. Isn't it so funny? I mean, I remember Atari and like
Yeah.
Cubits and Centipede and whatever those
Yeah.
games were.
I mean, arcade games, like, putting quarters into arcade games, Atari and television. It was a very different era for all of that. But, it's one of those things where a lot of these games you had to play against one of your little kid friends. I mean, you couldn't play really, nowadays you could be all by yourself. This used to be a thing of like go to your neighbor friend's house and you had to sit side by side and play the video game together. So that's a little bit different than now people are either playing against their AI fancy electronic computer opponent, or they're doing it over the internet, I guess, with other humans. But yeah, we had to go down the block and play with each other. And yeah, I was of the era of being a little bit of a free range kid, get
Yeah.
to ride your bike and go a mile or two from home. That seems to not happen as much anymore, but 8-year-old me got to do that.
Yeah. Right. Right. And those were the days, my friend. I mean, it was nice to just when you could just let your kids go outside or be a kid and go outside and play and be with friends and video games though, I'm glad that you mentioned that you would do it with a friend because people think of it often as a solitary kind of a thing, but it can be very much a group thing.
Yeah.
Two of my sons, they have this standing date. They live in different states, but they every
Uh-huh.
Saturday night they play video games. And I've got a grandson now who plays with them and a couple other people, and so they stay connected that way. And I think it's great.
Yeah. And, I don't have any, in the spirit of getting to know each other, I don't have any kids. So I shouldn't be speaking about any parenting of like, what do we let kids do or not do anymore here in 2024. Yeah. Very different world than the early 80s. But yeah, that world has changed.
It's
Yeah.
true. It's true. So you decided to be an engineer. So
Yes.
were you just drawn to math and making things? Is that what made you want to be an engineer to start with?
Uh, I have the aptitude for it, maybe more than a passion for engineering. I wasn't the type of kid that took apart things and tried putting them back together successfully or not. Um, I mean, I always had, aptitude for math. I had more interest in science. And, I was really fortunate to have some incredibly good public school opportunities, Livonia, Michigan, where um, my parents moved us right as I was finishing kindergarten in Ohio, where I was born. They chose a town that had an amazing public school district. And I always give Livonia Public Schools a lot of credit. Third grade, 8-year-old me got accepted into the district's gifted and talented program. And that sounds like an obnoxious label to put upon myself, but that's what the program was called. And I'll tell you, it was a more comfortable fit, for me to be, so it was a magnet school of kids from across the city. That was a better environment for me at the time. And so, I was able to get the education. It wasn't so much tied to, well, you're in this grade, you need to do this. It was much more based on, your abilities and great opportunities. The high school that I went to had a math, science, computer half day magnet program that I was a part of. And so I always did really, well in school. But then there was this question of, well, what's that going to translate into college studies? Like I was really seriously into music. Really serious about that. Played drums and percussion. Through high school, I probably spent as much time on music as I did on math, science, computer type topics. I wanted to be a writer. I was editor of the high school newspaper, so I still had that idea of being a writer. My dad is an electrical engineer. Really did steer me toward engineering, and so I went to Northwestern University where I had chosen a school that left different options open for me. It was, a great engineering school, but not only engineering. I struggled to find a fit for a major, chemical engineering. Like, no, that wasn't right for me. Um, and then I found a home in industrial engineering, which was honestly the closest thing to an undergraduate business degree that I could get there at Northwestern.
Yeah, interesting. And then you went to MIT.
I did. I didn't really imagine that. I wouldn't have gotten into MIT as an undergraduate. That's just the fact of the matter. I didn't have the test, and my test scores were good, but not MIT good. But after working for 2 years at General Motors, after undergraduate, during that time, I was working very closely with somebody who had graduated from a program at MIT, graduate school program called, at the time, Leaders for Manufacturing. And so I did really enjoy manufacturing and that aspect of business. And Steve Chong was his name. He really encouraged me to take a look at that program at MIT. I had an idea of going back for an MBA or maybe even a master's in industrial engineering, but no, that program at MIT, it's now called Leaders for Global Operations. but that was a great opportunity and something I really enjoyed being able to do. Between the studies and some lifelong friends, it's been more than 25 years now since I graduated from that program.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it sounds like a really great program. I've got a granddaughter who is applying right now to MIT
As an
and
undergrad,
as an
or
undergrad.
okay, wow,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah. Tough,
yeah.
tough to get into. We'll see what happens with her, but hopefully it's
Well, I hope that works out for her, and tough to get into, but I'll tell you, I think even if that wouldn't have been the right choice for me. I think of what I heard about undergraduate life at MIT, I think Northwestern, and being able to do things like the marching band and go to Big Ten football games, and for me that element of campus life was important to me. But obviously, wow, great opportunity. I hope that works out for her if that's her number one choice. Yeah,
yeah, yeah. Well, thanks. Well, we'll see what
yeah,
happens.
yeah.
So life has evolved a lot for you because you went into one thing and then evolved into another and into another and into another. It's one thing I admire about you is that you've taken opportunities as they've come your way and made the most out of everything you've done. And so, what are you most passionate about now that you're working on doing whatever?
Yeah. Well, one of those opportunities or one of those twists it'll be 20 years ago in August. My career was very focused on manufacturing, as the listener will figure out by now, industrial engineering, General Motors, it's manufacturing, as an engineering and MBA program at MIT. I really thought I was going to pursue career paths in manufacturing leadership. And I pursued that for a while. I worked at a startup software company. That was one little twist. Went back to a large manufacturing company. And, over the last 20 years, my wife and we've moved a lot because of her career opportunities and her amazing work that she does. So in 2005, we were moving to the Dallas Fort Worth area, which put me on the job market. And it was a little bit right place, right time. I got a call from a recruiter at Johnson and Johnson, and they were hiring people, including people with backgrounds like mine, to join a consulting group that they had that worked with hospitals and health systems, helping them apply what we would call from its roots lean manufacturing concepts, or more broadly lean management concepts, for improving systems, for engaging everybody in improvement. How do we apply those lessons into healthcare? And so, to your point about passions, I've quickly developed a passion for helping everybody working in healthcare provide better patient care. And you might think an industrial engineer is mainly concerned about efficiency, but there are huge opportunities and huge needs to improve patient safety and the quality of care. And a lot of the causes of these problems, it's addressable. There's a related passion where I think sometimes people in healthcare sadly get discouraged or burned out, and they don't think these problems are fixable. I don't fault them for that. Or, they have great medical education, but they're not taught about designing and improving systems the way, I think industrial engineers get a really good education in. So there's been an opportunity to work with health systems around the world, not just across North America. So I was able to get into writing. I was able to tap into that passion. My first book, called Lean Hospitals, was published in 2008. So that's the same prefix to what you mentioned earlier, one of the podcasts I do called Lean Whiskey. Um, so whiskey's kind of a passion too, more of a just recreational passion of learning about and kind of understanding all of that. But the real core professional passions are about healthcare improvement, helping leaders and healthcare professionals who might feel stuck. Like, they want to improve, they wish they could improve, helping them, figure that out, not coming in with all the answers, but coming in and helping facilitate um, healthcare improvement. But then I think more broadly, I'm really passionate about wanting people to enjoy their workplace environment, to be engaged, to feel safe, to speak up, either, to admit mistakes without being punished unfairly, or being able to speak up with their ideas. And the I guess the final thing I'll share about healthcare for now is that sometimes people give up. I'm not faulting them for this, but they've tried speaking up early in their career, or they're not being listened to, or they're being told, stop being a troublemaker, and they give up and decide to just put their head down and do the best they can with the patient in front of them, instead of being able to find, I think it's really fulfilling. People find it fulfilling when they're engaged and involved in making things better, to prevent systemic errors, to prevent harm to patients, to prevent harm that would happen to them as healthcare professionals. So those are some things I'm really passionate about. And I think when we have a strong passion, I have to be careful to not get discouraged myself, because there's lots of pockets of improvement in healthcare, but there's still a lot of situations that aren't good for the people working there, and that kind of flows through to not being good for the patients sometimes.
Yeah, it's interesting, healthcare in our country, the changes that have transpired over the years. And I remember somebody telling me recently that years ago, it used to be how many patients per administrator, and now it's kind of how many administrators per patient.
Yeah.
And that just things have changed so much. And then I don't know, it's like you have to be your own advocate. You don't necessarily want to leave your person in the hospital alone overnight.
Don't,
You got to be
you
there,
really,
right?
you shouldn't. My advice would be don't do that. Yeah.
Yeah, right, right. Yeah, I had a situation one time. My mother-in-law had a pacemaker put in, and was spending the night. And in the middle of the night, a nurse came in and wanted to give her a catheter because she hadn't gone to the bathroom in a while. And I'm like, she hasn't gotten up because she's sleeping. She doesn't need a
Yeah.
catheter.
Let
And
her rest.
yeah, and she was insisting that it happen. I'm like, no, don't do it to this poor woman. She's finally asleep. Like, let her sleep, let her have her peace. But yeah, you do. And I'm sure for the nurse, she thought she was doing the right thing. But
Mm.
you need to be there. You do need somebody there to be your advocate. And it just in thinking about things in business in general, I feel like we've gotten away from the heart of
Mhm.
business, right? Like everything is about quotas, or about, things that we can measure with money, or we can
Mhm.
measure on a graph somehow. And heart isn't something that you can necessarily measure, but
Mhm.
it makes such a difference in a company
Yes.
and in healthcare, wherever you are, when the heart is there, when caring is there. What's your
Yes.
take?
Oh, I agree with you absolutely. And that feeling can be hard to measure. I mean, you can try to survey employees, or you can just try to, I think, get a sense of it. So that's one thing that was really powerful, coming into healthcare, is that sense of passion and purpose that people have. Like when I worked in manufacturing, people would take pride in their work. They wanted to do quality work. They didn't want to be, tripped up by mistakes that were possible because of systemic causes. Um, that heart is, something we really have to tap into in healthcare, and not let it turn into something that's so numbers driven, or when numbers are efficient. Here's the problem, and one of the problems is when the efficiency or time-based numbers, or the cost numbers, become the primary objective. That's really demoralizing to people in healthcare, because they are in caring professions. I mean, it's health care. It's right in the word. And, we can apply, these systems improvement methods that come from industrial engineering and manufacturing to actually improve efficiency in really good ways. And this is, I think a global opportunity and global situation. So I remember back, it was probably about 15 years ago, a hospital that I was able to visit a couple of times in the Netherlands was applying these principles, and they were trying to, like, there's a difference between, I would call, false efficiency of just pressuring people to work faster. Well, now that might lead to cutting corners around safety and quality. It's going to be frustrating. You're not going to be able to provide the care that you want to provide from your heart. But this hospital in the Netherlands was really trying to make work easier for nurses and for others involved. Like, let's organize the supplies better to be of service to the nurses so they spend less time running around gathering up their supplies, and they can then take more time to be caring and not be in such a rush when a patient wants to talk about their care or their concerns or their fears. So their whole approach, as they translated it into English, was what they called loving care. And I thought that was beautiful. That's what healthcare should be, and making healthcare better should make it more loving, more caring, instead of, like, we're not trying to turn healthcare into some sort of, like, coldly ruthless efficiency machine. It really needs to be, we're not trying to turn the hospital into a factory. We're trying to make the hospital a better hospital and let the healthcare professionals have the time to be more caring.
Right, right, right. Yeah. Easier said than done, I would think, right? Like,
Yeah.
because it's a mind shift in so
Mhm.
many ways, because it's, it can be so easy to go to your job, you get to work, you do your thing, you do everything that's required of you, you turn in the paperwork,
Mhm.
whatever it is that you're supposed to do, and not feel like you have time to really think about caring or think about loving the people that you're working with and working
Mhm.
for, and helping.
Yeah. And I want to share one other example. I had a chance to go to Japan recently, and this was with, we're visiting a number of companies with people from around the world, to learn about, some of these management practices and mindsets we might be able to bring home. Well, one of these companies was a Toyota supplier. They made different metal components for transmissions and other types of products. So even, so it was a factory, and you wouldn't expect to hear the language and the mindsets that we heard from the president of the company on down, that their primary goal is employee happiness. You're
Mm,
like, what? And well, how, you can't pay the bills with happiness. But I think they realized employee happiness combined with a very strong sense of mission is good for everybody involved. So that happiness that leads to everything from lower employee turnover, which can mean perhaps better teamwork, better quality, better performance. That flows through to the bottom line of, happy employees, I think, is a pathway to happy customers. And think about times when, like, we go into any business, whether it's, a coffee shop or any business where we're interacting with people face to face. There's times where I feel like it's kind of soul sucking, or you can tell, like, nobody here seems happy at the
right.
least. And I think, like, oh, like, I feel that empathy for the employees, and that's generally not the kind of place where I'm going to get good customer service.
Mm,
So I hope business leaders, whether it's an entrepreneur, with some sort of business here in the U.S., or somebody running a hospital halfway around the world, employee happiness is not just, I think, a noble goal. It's actually really good for the business. And I think a lot of people think there's these trade-offs of, like, well, if we're going to be this professional business. We have to be, all about the numbers. And we hear people say like, oh, well, it's not personal, it's just business. But businesses are made of people, and you have to pay attention to employee happiness. And I think people realize this a lot in healthcare, where again, I think there are those strong connections where, in the supplies everywhere, if we take care of the people doing the work, they can take care of the customers.
Mhm.
And whether we call that happiness or loving or caring, boy, listen to these words coming out of my mouth as an engineer.
Yeah. Well, it is interesting because, here too, we're in this new season, this new paradigm shift, right? With all the AI that's going on. And I think, it's exciting. It's kind of chilling and thrilling at the same time. The thrilling part to me is
Yeah.
I want Rosie the maid like Jane Jetson had. And I never want to do dishes again. Like I'm excited for something like that to happen. But then we have all these movies that have come out of Hollywood with these dystopian societies, and everything's brown and dirty, and it's the AI has taken over the world.
Mhm.
And I think the difference between a major difference between humanity and AI is heart, is caring. Like
Right.
AI can't care. It can do a whole lot of things, and there's
Yeah.
more to come, which I think is really exciting. But the heart, the caring, the uh,
Mhm.
compassion is impossible for AI.
Yeah. It can emulate the words that a human would use when it seems like a human cares, right? It's maybe been trained to
Right,
do
right,
that. And some humans fake caring maybe more so than they actually feel it. But no, I think when it comes down to it, though, you can't fake any of that. If you say things as a leader that don't follow through into words, then people see through that. If you say things like, "Oh, our people are our most important asset," but then people start to roll their eyes, and it becomes, back in the day, Dilbert cartoons were hanging up in cubicles because of that gap between what leaders say and what leaders do. People see right through that.
right. Yeah, it's so true. It's got to be authentic. It's got to come from the right place to be able to do the right things. You
Mhm.
mentioned Japan and the company where I love that model.
Yeah.
Like that is great. Make your employees happy, do everything you can to keep your employees happy. Of
Mhm.
course, it's going to translate into happy customers, and it's going to affect the bottom line in positive ways,
Mhm.
and for so many reasons. And I have a friend in Japan, Ken Honda, who his mentor was this guy who would say, hopefully I'm not going to butcher it, but
Mhm.
arigato. It's like
Mhm.
thank you, but it means
Yeah,
more
thank
than
you.
that, right? And in Japanese. And he would say it, his goal, I think, was to say it 1,000 times a day. Like
Really?
he'd get in
Yeah.
the elevator and just go arigato, arigato, arigato.
Mhm.
And then at work, he had a factory, and at work, he brought that into the factory, and where everybody every day, it was part of their everyday speech was
Mhm.
to be grateful, to be
Yeah.
saying thank you
Yeah.
regularly. And it affected everybody because
Mhm.
gratitude does that, right? There's certain things that are going to change the way you look at things or change the way you feel about things. Gratitude is one of them. And it changed it affected his company that grew and grew and grew and became the biggest in Japan, and
Mhm.
whatever, all the stuff that you want to have happen.
Yeah.
But it came from a place not of I am going to do this so I can grow my business. It
Mhm.
came from a place of I'm going to do this because it's the right thing to do. I'm going to do this because it's
Mhm.
something I believe in.
Yes.
And like you said, people see right through it when things aren't coming from that place.
Mhm. Yeah, and again, like I would encourage people, don't think about false trade-offs between things like employee happiness and the long-term good and the success of the company, right? So the employee happiness is not being driven by, look, people realize, okay, we could come into work and sit at our desks and eat ice cream and watch Netflix all day. We might be happy, but that's probably not fulfilling. And if you're hiring people that are connected to your purpose and your reason for existing as a company, which I think has to be more than the bottom line. Like if we exist to make a profit, I don't think that's sustainable if there's no deeper sense of service to others. And I think a lot of these Japanese companies, and I'm not trying to paint a picture that they're all like this, because I think successful companies in the U.S. Are like this too. They have that strong sense of purpose, and then the bottom line profits are an output. And yes, we need that. We need to grow. We need to reinvest in the business because that's what creates job security. I think everyone realizes, you hear these stories these days, like people that were hired into tech companies during a pandemic work from home era, and these companies were just flooding to hire people. And you hear these stories of like people like, yeah, I got paid six figures and never had anyone assign work to me. Like that for a while is probably healthy or makes someone happy, but it's probably unhealthy. Like it almost starts to lead to sense of guilt and maybe mental health issues or fears that well, I'm going to get fired and they're going to sue me for all the money they paid. Like it can't be just superficial dopamine bursts of happiness. It's got to be, I think, like that deeper sense of fulfillment. Another company we visited in Japan is called Ina Foods, and they really are focused on their next 100 years. Which is I think a fascinating approach, and they have an approach they call tree ring management, where they want to grow steadily the way a tree grows. They're not trying to get into hyper growth. They want to grow steadily. They want to be of service to their customers. They want stability for their employees instead of cycles of hiring and firing and boom and bust type cycles. But they very much talked about a company as an organic system, like a person, and that in the way they said this and the way it was translated into English is that that profit is excrement. That profit is an end result of everything that the company as an organism does. And they're not saying profit is bad, but I think they're saying profit is an end result of doing things that are good and fulfilling and of service to others. So it's a weird analogy, but that's how they described it.
Yeah, that was a weird analogy, but it's so true that if you're doing things in a way that people are happy to be there, they feel purpose, they buy into your purpose, and know what the company's about and are doing it, and are treated fairly and treated well, and their ideas are listened to, and there's no judgment, but they're able to talk freely, all the things that make for a good culture, a good atmosphere in a business, then yeah, you're going to make a profit, but it's not the number one thing. It is the byproduct, excrement. I don't know that I'd use that word, but it is sort of the byproduct of doing things the right way.
Yes, and stated another way, I mean, there are a lot of companies. I learned this in the auto industry almost 30 years ago, and in this lean management approach, there's a set of, you could call it a balanced scorecard set of priorities. And it's usually stated, kind of as an acronym of these letters of this priority of SQDC. Doesn't exactly roll off the tongue. It doesn't spell anything, but you get it drilled into your head. The priorities are safety, quality, delivery, and cost. And delivery would be like, on time delivery. So it would be things like, I think of, local Starbucks. In some Starbucks stores, people seem really happy, and some Starbucks locations, people don't. So, safety would be first off employee safety. You don't want spills on the floor. You don't want people to slip and fall because they're rushing around and they say, well, we don't have time to clean up that spill. You would say, in this lean management approach, well, no, safety first, absolutely. Food safety for the customers is important. You're storing everything properly. Quality, the quality of not only not making customers sick, but giving them the right food, the right beverage with the right kind of, environment. On-time delivery, you don't want to make customers wait too long. And then, I think the lean management approach says if we do those three things well, safety, quality, and delivery, lower cost follows, which is very different than a quote unquote cost cutting mindset where, if cost or profit is the primary goal, those other things might suffer. And employee happiness and morale, is going to suffer, unfortunately, as well. So I think that's part of the mindset and the approach that is really transferable, whether it's a car company, a software company, a hospital, a coffee shop. I mean, a lot of these things are really familiar, I think, human dynamics.
Yeah, well, and I think it's that's such a good point. And it's about getting back to the fact that we are human, right?
Yeah.
And so we all want to feel seen and heard and valued. And, I've heard for years that somebody would rather hear a great job than get a raise. I'm not sure how true that is because people like a raise, but
Yeah, you should
but
you should get both.
you should get both, exactly. But we're human. And it's
Mhm.
not like we hang our humanity up in the closet when we get to work and we
Right.
just become this number. We're still Mark and Kim. We're still
Mhm.
whoever we are and should be treated respectfully as a human, as you
Mhm.
want to be treated as a human, but also valued for our humanity. So it's
Yes.
not just pushing numbers or getting stuff done, but our humanness is what makes us good at our job when allowed to be.
Yes. Yes. And everybody is capable of participating in the improvement of their work. But to your point, if we let them, right? So, how often are people explicitly or subtly told, "Oh, just shut up and do your job," and or people give up because they're not being listened to. There's a kind of a rich management philosophy that a lot of people would attribute to Toyota. So we're kind of going back to now the auto industry and not just how they do things in Japan, but here in the US and in other countries from that Toyota management philosophy, which is, quite often the basis of what we would call lean management. Toyota talks a lot about, it gets translated into English as either respect for people or respect for humanity. And I've heard people say that respect for humanity is actually a better, more nuanced translation because respect for people could mean I treat you respectfully. Where what you were saying, Kim, and it made me think of this idea of, well, no, I need to respect our human nature, and that includes a desire to do good work, a desire to be heard, a desire to contribute, a desire to be creative. That we really need to embrace that, and again, like not have people be cogs in a machine, but we're part of a living, breathing organism. A company is again really just a group of people, sort of like back in the days. I think of early human development of banding together, of not being a solitary living being or not even being with your family, but living in groups of other people that cooperate because you survive better and can accomplish more than you could on your own. I think that's why we build and form companies. Like I work as a solopreneur a lot. I also work with the software company KaiNexus that again I think has a lot of these good cultural traits of respect and purpose and passion, leading to growth and success, but we band together. We choose to do this, and we can choose how we treat each other. We don't need to look. Sadly, there are some very famous business executives out there that seem like they're real jerks. And I'm afraid sometimes people are like, well, you have to be a jerk to be successful. I'm like that's a choice.
You don't have to be a jerk. Yeah, it's kind of funny. Like, I remember years ago, probably 1990 or something, I had a golf course and I was a little frustrated. Like, I just needed my pro shop to have this sense of urgency because we were flipping the course. We had a morning shotgun, afternoon shotgun, all these golfers out on the course. We got to wash carts, get them set up. And they were just kind of walking slowly. And I'm like, come on, you guys, we got, time is of the essence. And so I voiced this later to my dad. And I
Yeah.
just said, "Guy, it just is frustrating, to try to light a fire under people sometimes, it can be so hard." And he said, "Honey, sometimes you got to just swear at them." And I'm like, "You got to just swear at them." Dad, I will never swear at people. And something I found throughout the years, well, but he was 1916 management style, right? I mean,
Sure.
things change and evolve, and you either change with it or you might go under. You might not stay in business, but his management style was always interesting to me. I don't know that he did the three martini lunch, but certainly was of the era too. And but yeah, you got to treat people with respect. But so I didn't swear. But one thing I did discover in business is if I ever got to a point where I wanted to raise my voice at somebody, I knew it was over. I knew we shouldn't be working together because I don't think anybody should ever have to be yelled at work or talked rudely to at work or demeaned in any way. And if it gets to that point, then it's better to cut ties and send them away with a blessing instead of
Right.
whatever raising your voice. Like I can't even imagine that at work, but it happens.
Yeah. And when I graduated from Northwestern and went to General Motors, 1995, that was still like very much the 1960s style of management. A lot of yelling and screaming and cursing and blaming individuals for systemic problems, and us versus them between the union and management. And the root of the problem to me was put the root. I always talk about labor troubles. I'm like, well, maybe sometimes you have to call it management troubles. That's why you have a combative relationship that's formed over decades. And that plant was not performing well at all from the standpoints of safety or quality or on-time delivery or cost. And it was a great education for me because then we got a new plant manager after a year who was at that point probably had been a 20-year GM employee. So he'd been there his whole career, but he had an opportunity to go learn from Toyota in a joint venture plant that GM and Toyota started in the 80s. And he brought those lessons and that different leadership style. And it was inspiring. One leader, it's not that he was going to fix everything himself, but the impact that one leader had in terms of trying to shift the culture in a building with 800 people, hourly and salaried, who wanted to build high quality engines for Cadillac cars. That leadership style made a huge difference of not yelling and screaming. And he said at one point, I think this was powerful, the era of blaming the workers for everything is over. To say that as the top leader in the plant was powerful, and I was happy to hear it. I think a lot of people who heard it probably didn't or could not believe that he meant it. But yeah, that old style of leadership did not serve General Motors well. And it's something that they and other automakers have been trying to change. I've not been in a GM factory in a long time, but culture like that is, the bigger the company, the harder it is to change. It was hard to change in one location, yet alone in a large global company that at that time employed something like 300,000 people. The company is much smaller today, 30 years later.
Yeah, but it is amazing how one person can be the catalyst for change. And when, especially when that one person, when it's a positive thing, and people go, man, I'd rather work for that guy.
Mhm.
I'd rather feel like he's feeling every day or she's feeling every day. I'd rather have that attitude in my work life.
Mhm.
It makes me wonder too, Mark, like back in my dad's time or whenever people would get a job and they would stay in that job until they
Mhm.
retired,
Yeah.
right? And now people are going from place to place, not necessarily staying,
Mhm.
changing careers, even changing whatever. And it makes me wonder if part of it is because they're looking for that place where they fit in the culture.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's a big part of it. And I mean, I kind of on a related thought, I always chuckle if I hear corporate leaders complaining that, employees aren't loyal anymore. And I think, well, I think the companies kind of started with the breaking of that loyalty when it became much more acceptable culturally and from a societal standpoint to do mass layoffs and downsizing. And I think employees learned, well, if the company's not going to be loyal to me, why should I offer loyalty that's not going to be returned? And in Japan is kind of going through its own transition where this idea of lifetime employment, I think, had held on longer in Japan, but that's changing now, either because there are some companies that don't share that philosophy, or to your point, employees don't want to work for the same company for 35 or 40 years and take your retirement, that they aspire to different challenges or different opportunities as technologies have changed. And I mean, there's a lot more that's potentially disruptive to our jobs and our careers. And again, AI. I mean, we are no December 2024. We can't. It's hard. I don't know. It's hard to anticipate what challenges or opportunities are here right now or right around the corner. I don't know.
Right. Yeah, it's very interesting. It'll be interesting to see. It's a great time to be alive and figure out what's going to be happening and
Yeah.
what the future is going to look like. I have a Tesla, and however people feel about Teslas, I don't care really. I like my car,
Mhm.
and it has this self-driving feature that is fantastic. I love it. I think it's actually a better driver than I am.
Mhm.
My kids would tell you that for sure it's a better driver than I am.
Yeah.
But it's pretty genius the way it changes lanes when it needs to, it slows down when it needs to, it turns like you put in the GPS where you're going and it goes there. Doesn't matter if
Mhm.
you're in the city or on the highway. And I think we're going to see more and more of that kind of a thing, which it's up to us to either embrace or be afraid
Mhm.
of. And fear doesn't ever do anybody any good. So to be excited, I think is the way to go personally. And but I also think the companies that are going to thrive, the companies that are going to keep going are the companies that truly not just say it, but really care about
Yeah.
the people that are working for them and the people they're working for.
Yeah. And I think companies that also try to look down the road. I mean, one of the companies we visited in Japan, mentioned they were making automotive parts. Well, you talk about the transition that's sort of happening from everyone driving gasoline powered engines to more and more people driving electric vehicles. A lot of the parts that this company makes no longer exist in a world of electric vehicles. So they know that change is coming. And rather than just being victim to it, they're trying to get a little bit ahead of the curve and asking, well, what other products can we get into based on our, to use the MBA word, our core competencies? They know how to cut metal and make certain types of parts. It doesn't have to always be, these transmission parts. And then there was another company that was even more proactively saying basically, like economists might call this, creative destruction. Like we are going to innovate away our own work before somebody else does.
Mm.
And I think, that's powerful to say instead of being a victim of all of these changes, we need to get ahead of that and realize the world is changing. We could either be, you know, like, Kodak, in its decline as we shifted to digital photography, instead of being in denial or being a victim of all these things that are out of our control. You've got to get ahead of the curve, and it might be painful in the short term in certain ways, but better for your survival down the road. And, a company, and that company, Ena Foods, with, its 100-year outlook, a company can outlast us all as humans. Again, unless we get uploaded to the cloud and merged with AI and our consciousness never, I don't know. I'm not an expert in any of that, and it seems like science fiction, but we can have a company that continues to evolve and change and survive instead of going out of business to be replaced by the new company. I think that's a challenge for people that are looking to leave a business to future generations or to continue serving their community for future generations.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. I've never heard of a company with a 100-year goal.
Mhm.
It's what's our goal for the year? What's a
Mhm.
5-year? What's a 10-year?
Oh,
Maybe
5 years
20.
seems
Right. Way out there. Right.
way
Yeah,
out there.
exactly. And so 100 years, I mean, that's some optimism, but
Yeah.
that also you do have to adjust and change. You do have to have the right mindset, the right, I don't know, the right leadership to lead for another 100 years. And I like that. I have a friend who is 89 years old and he's got a 10-year plan. And I
Mhm.
think, oh, you, of course you should have a 10-year
Yeah.
plan. I like that.
I
So
do.
having a 100-year plan, I mean, that's good. It would make you look at things differently, I think, and
And they
realize,
don't, yeah.
yeah,
And they
that
don't
it's
have,
not
sorry to
just the
jump in. Yeah.
day, sorry,
Right. Yeah.
but it's not just looking at today because you're
Right.
looking so far ahead. And so the bumps that you might experience today will teach you the things that you need to know to get
Yeah.
farther down the
Yeah.
road.
And the Foods doesn't have a crystal ball to tell them exactly what's going to be happening in the year 21, 24. But just putting that mindset out there of we need to think about decisions we make now and how that affects things down the road. It's hard enough to project 5 years down the road, but I think what you were saying there, Kim, the best way to deal with uncertainty is getting better at dealing with uncertainty and being adaptable and flexible. And it doesn't mean having a 5-year plan that we just stubbornly keep marching forward on. And there's an old, I think it's attributed to Dwight Eisenhower, general and president, said something like, oh gosh, I'm going to paraphrase this, or if not directly quote it. The plan, something to the effect of like, the plan is, oh gosh, I'm butchering it. The planning is priceless, but the plan might be useless. Here, can I just Google it?
Yeah. Yeah. Google it because
Speaking
it sounds
speaking
really
of
good.
mistakes, plans are worthless, but planning is everything.
Mm,
Plans are worthless, but planning is everything. And it says Eisenhower attributed the quote to something he heard and learned in the army. But the process, the act of going through the planning, sometimes allows us to set up for, well, what's our plan if this happens, and what's our plan if that happens? Right? So that automaker, that auto supplier should probably have plans like, well, what happens if electric vehicle adoption stalls out? And what happens if electric vehicle adoption becomes 95% of all new cars sold in a decade? So I think of it sometimes as like a playbook. I'm a football fan. I've never played football, but teams have a playbook. And sometimes they try to script out, here are the first 5 plays we're going to run to start the game. But nobody knows, like, okay, well, 8 minutes left in the fourth quarter. You don't know if you're going to be on offense or defense. get a loan to say, well, this is the play we're going to run then. You have a playbook and you've planned and you've practiced so that you can use the right play, hopefully in the right scenario. Choosing the right play and then executing the play well, are two different things. But that's where, planning, back to Eisenhower, planning is everything.
Yeah, yeah, I love that quote, and I love the analogy of the playbook because it's so true. And I think, as we're talking about humanity and business, I think we've lost some humanity in life in general.
Mm.
Like when I was growing up, our neighbors would come on over and they'd just come in the front door because everybody knew each other and everybody was friends, and we had block parties or whatever, and my parents would go play bridge at night, and just all the stuff, right, that neighbors used to do, and look out for each other, watch out for each other. And we've gotten away from that, away from those neighborhood things. In some neighborhoods, it still exists, but I think it's becoming more and more rare. And COVID, I don't think helped us in keeping us home, because then it's easier to seclude yourself from people. But then I think the Attorney General came out with a study that over 50% of Americans live in loneliness and severe loneliness.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like, well, shoot, you can be with people and be lonely. And I
Mm-hmm.
think about that in an office or in a work situation. You can be with all these people and be lonely. And you can be in life wherever and be lonely. And I think too, it goes back to what we're talking about in business, and that we've lost the humanity, the love for humanity and the heart, and need to somehow get it back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Some companies and some leaders are moving in that direction, and I hope we hear more about those stories. And, I hope that inspires other budding leaders or entrepreneurs, to choose that path.
Yeah, it's interesting. I read an article that your wife wrote, and she talked about at a place that she was at, that the mechanics, their bosses were pretty much in offices, and would just kind of give orders a couple times a day, whatever. And when instead they started actually engaging with the mechanics, things changed dramatically. When it wasn't just a one-way conversation, now go do this, but actually talking to them, and having a two-way conversation and getting feedback, and maybe even ask about their family. I don't know, but it changed everything, right?
Yeah, and she's an executive in an aerospace company, and it's a company that's really embraced this quote unquote lean management mindset and approach. And both she and her CEO are constantly talking about, here these letters again, SQDC, and that treating people differently, the era of yelling and screaming and the boss always being right. Like, no, that's not what their leadership style, that's not the leadership style they want anymore at this company, where that had been the norm, for a very long time. And, her CEO, I saw him speak at a conference, and, he came in from the outside and quickly diagnosed, as he described it, it was a shoot the messenger culture. People did not feel safe talking about certain realities, and he was working really hard to change that. Of saying,
Yeah.
I think he said pretty directly, quoting, I want to hear bad news faster, and how you react to that quote unquote bad news makes all the difference. Do people
Yeah.
feel safe to speak up or not? And that's what this phrase psychological safety is all about, as squishy as that sounds. It's really just, how safe do you feel to speak up? When people feel safe to speak up, this is the thing that goes hand in hand. They're going to feel better about themselves and what they're doing, and the company is going to perform better. End of
Right.
story.
Yeah.
We got to
Right.
help people to feel safe speaking up.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And I think there's some ego work sometimes that has to happen to allow that to happen. And it should never be about ego. It should be about people. And so
Yeah.
if we can get back, to what we're talking about and back to humanity,
Yes.
hopefully those things we'll see more and more in companies. And I think
I
those are
hope
the companies that are going to see this AI thing through. I mean, I think those are the companies that are really going to flourish, are the ones that value and respect humanity and have open dialogue like that.
yeah.
Yeah.
And let's keep celebrating those companies. I do what I can to share those stories and highlight, some of the companies I've mentioned here. Ina Foods in Japan, INA Foods. If people want to, Google them. Kinexus, the software company, tech startup that I work with. The good things that are happening. Barry Waymiller is another company that I was going to mention, and their people-centric approach to leadership is really impressive. So it's Barry hyphen, so it's like BARRY hyphen Waymiller, WEHMILLER. I think there's some great stories out there that hopefully inspire others. And where my wife is at GE Aerospace, there's good things happening there too, I should say.
Yeah. Yeah. She's remarkable, by the way.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I would love to meet her someday. She's fabulous. So you're a lucky man, obviously, with a wonderful wife, and you've got these podcasts going. You've got so much going, Mark, and I appreciate you taking the time to be here today because you're a busy guy. And so I appreciate everything that you do. Your podcasts are all about helping people and having a little fun too along the way. And so everything you do, you just have such a great attitude about the things that you do, and obviously really have a respect for humanity. So I appreciate that very much.
Oh, thank you, Kim. I thank you for your kind words and for having good conversation. I really appreciate being able to spend time with you here. This has been really engaging, and appreciate what you're sharing and advocating for as well.
Yeah, well, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, we're in this together. That's the thing. So if people want to get in touch with you, what's the best way?
So my website is just markgraban.com, GRAB like Bravo, AN, markgraban.com. Social media wise, LinkedIn. I'm pretty easy to find. My name is unique enough, even if someone searches and misspells it a little bit, I think they'll find me. So that would be the best place to connect also if people want to, would be on LinkedIn.
Yeah, great. And you've got your books available. You've got lots of information on your website. And there we go. Mistakes that make us. Yeah. Yeah. Such a great book. Buy it. Get it for people for Christmas. Buy 6 of them at a time, not just one. Give them away. It's really good. So
well, if people want to buy them for their team and do a book club, they can reach out to me about that. Even I've got some bulk book packages if people are interested.
Great. Yeah, that's a great idea to buy them for your team or book club. Yeah, either one of those. So, well, again, Mark, thank you so much for being here. And thank you for joining us this week. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. And until we see each other again, be blessed.